Welcome to Face Forward, the podcast, the series that takes you behind the scenes of the riveting world of clinical trial management. I am your host, Valerie Coveney, and I am thrilled to be your guide on this journey through the nuances of planning, executing, and navigating the clinical research landscape. Welcome to today's episode as we explore AI-driven drug development and clinical trials. We are joined by three guest speakers to take part in a roundtable. We have Guillaume Gigon, Vice President of Technology and AI at Innovaderm, Nardin Nakhla, co-founder and CTO of Simmunome AI, and Christian Dansereau, founder and CEO of Perceiv AI. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Valerie.
In this episode, we'll explore the challenges and benefits of integrating AI into clinical research, particularly in the neurological, immune, and dermatological fields. We'll discuss how AI accelerates drug discovery and improves trial efficiency through predictive analytics. And finally, we'll look ahead to the next steps for AI in managing clinical trials. So let's begin here with the challenges in clinical research. Nardin, what's your take on it?
Yeah, well, there are two types of challenges from what we see. There's basically the challenges that are already there in clinical research, and there's the challenges that face AI in applying AI in clinical research. So if we all know that clinical trials, the failure rate is very high. It's about 84.6% right now, and 52% of those failures are due to efficacy, which is like much higher than other reasons for failure. And that's across all therapeutic areas. So like one of the gaps that we see right now is, or at least like one of the most pressing issues is really target or drug efficacy that we can only see at the very end of the clinical trials, and that causes late stage failures. So this lack of efficacy happens because of like choosing the wrong target, targeting the wrong group of patients, or like having it too general, even though it might be better to target your therapeutic to a specific subpopulation of patients. So that these are all things that AI can contribute a lot and have a high impact if it is integrated in the whole clinical trial procedure. And then on the other hand, that we are faced by, like when we integrate AI in clinical trials, there are also challenges that we face, which is standardization of data collection, because machine learning relies a lot on data. So the way we collect data, if it's not standard, it becomes very, very difficult to integrate, and it might not be as useful as we would want it to be. So things like that, a reluctancy in data sharing, especially when it comes to drug development. There is the issue of privacy and yeah, even with the historical data, you would want sponsors to share their historical data, but not necessarily that's the direction or the way they go. So that's something that also we face in applying AI.
Yeah, Nardin, I fully agree with you. There's so many challenges in clinical trial, and hopefully AI is going to contribute to help us with most of them. To the ones you identified, I can easily add as well. The data size and sampling size that is a constraint in clinical trial, because of course we need a lot of data to ensure that we're going to have a good success, and probably AI is going to help by decreasing this size, and of course it's going to decrease the cost of the clinical trial at the end. We're talking about human limitation as well. When you ask people to interpret or to give a diagnostic on something, of course there's a human interpretation and perception about this. So hopefully with AI we're going to be more accurate with this. And there's again a lot of things, timelines. It's a huge competitive landscape in clinical trial, and timelines is very important. We need to deliver fast, accurate, and cost-effective results, and this will, of course, be greatly helped with AI.
Yeah, double clicking on what you just said, Guillaume and Nardin. I think those clinical trials are certainly long, costly, and have suffered from very high failure. The efficacy is certainly a challenge. One of the things that we've seen also is the higher and higher screen failure. So now that we are a bit better at selecting these patients, so obviously everything goes around the fact that there's no one size fit all for these drugs, and more precise you are in the selection process, better the outcome of these clinical trials may be. You may use different ways to select these patients, and it can be a simple biomarker, it can be a complex AI solution, or a multiple cascade of different criteria of selection, inclusion, exclusion. But we see an increase of screen failure rate, and therefore more people to be screened, to echo what Guillaume was just saying, is not helping the execution of the clinical trial. If you need to screen more people, that means more time, more sites to be able to execute that in a timely fashion. And this is even causing delays in the delivery of these clinical trials. So I think in order to deliver higher quality clinical trials that will be done in a reasonable amount of time, we'll need to have ways to select more appropriately these patients and potentially also design these trials in a more optimal or efficient way than the current way we are doing those inclusion, exclusion, selection, or like accumulations of steps to select those patients will increase the burden and the time to get these patients enrolled. So if you can have ways to optimize that process, that will hopefully result in better outcome and better trials.
Yeah, especially that the price is so high if you don't, like, I think it, like, sometimes it's perceived that, oh, we're using a new tool, so that's a risk. But I think the bigger risk is to not use the tools that are available. The bigger risk is to just like go for a trial and error attempt, and because you wait till the very end to know if you're going to be successful or not.
Yeah, and that's a massive risk, cost, and also not knowing or not mitigating as much as possible your risk of multiple years of development and all the work that you've done in preclinical to develop that asset.
Yeah.
But the status quo is not an option, right? The business is growing so fast that we need to move. So now it's not a question anymore on, do we want to use this type of tool? It's how we're going to use it.
Yeah.
And when? Well, yesterday, probably.
Well, yeah, and success of these clinical trials is going down, cost is going up of these clinical trials. So yeah, you definitely need to change that because it's not going into the right direction for sure.
And it will take time. Like, in my opinion, I don't think it it will be solved like in a day or even in a year. I think it takes time to integrate these solutions. It takes time to make it part of the whole standard process, and it takes time for the solutions also to be more to address exactly where the pain points are, because we're developing, but we're also learning, and we're developing and learning, and it's an iterative process. And I think the adoption will take some time, but eventually the hope is to have the biggest impact. I think in the clinical trials, this is where we have the chance to have the highest impact of improvement.
Actually, I have a question for you, Nardin, on this. Like, a behavior that we've seen, at least in neurology, is that given the time of developing or conducting a clinical trial that can range like from 5 years to 8 years in some cases, with including the screening period, a lot of pharma are very tempted to kind of jump into the next thing very fast, or in the next population, or earlier in the disease process, without necessarily having a good ground understanding of how the disease may unfold at these stages. Like, we're just starting to understand some specific evolution of biomarkers in some very niche, disease stages, and we're already starting to start clinical trials in earlier phases where we have even less knowledge. And it's always that chase, right, of trying to get the new drug. Obviously, that will probably come out in like 10 years. So you need to anticipate what will be the next big market, the next big thing. And that's why they are starting now. But it's also like starting with a lot of potential risk or accumulated compounded risk.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
What's the question?
Yeah, sorry. No, I mean, if you have any thoughts, like given that you were kind of advocating to be careful and take our
Yeah.
time and do the things in a more constructive way, or like as we accumulate more proof, evidence, and understanding, then we build these types of trials. But the thing is, there is also a push from the other side to be first, faster to the market, and maybe like take some jumps in the process, or the more scientific process, or the things
No,
we
I
would
think
like to see.
no, I totally agree. And I think when it comes to diseases and treating patients, we really cannot take the approach of, okay, let's go for it and see what, like, we've seen that it doesn't help and it doesn't work. And there are, as you said, like in neurobiology, like and in rare disease, there are many therapeutic areas where we don't understand much at all. And the risk is much bigger if you just decide to take less risk. Like it's a paradox. You think you're taking less risk by following the traditional way, but you're taking a bigger risk by not collecting evidence. And yeah, especially in those disease areas, evidence is very much needed. And there is data. It's not like we don't have data. Like there is data, and it's just time to learn from the data and learn from the past and inform the no-go decisions at every step. And I think that's very important. Every single step, every single decision is to be informed with data evidence.
And that's why and where AI is going to contribute the most, because a human cannot compile this data, never, ever. And
exactly.
the previous methods, the analytical methods that we use, because they were driven by human, meaning we have to code what we are looking for, were not working. And AI is going to make up us making this big jump where with machine learning, with different techniques, we're going to, and deep AI, of course, we're going to learn things from the data we never thought about. It's going to come up without having this human trying to find a solution. The machine is going to contribute and help us finding solution we can't even think about.
Agree. Totally. I mean, it's going to help us be more precise, but also more systematic, or have the kind of the same rules apply across, let's say, different sites, different region. Like you have variation or variance between sites and the way they operate. Having ways or AI solution can also make a more systematic process out of this.
Yeah. But now we have to be realistic as well. We live in a very controlled process. Documentation, etc., is key in clinical trial, right? So it's great that we dream and we know that the technology will give us the ability to reach these goals. But we will face challenge because, we have to also understand that we cannot go everywhere with these new tools. And we need to structure our approach to AI, right?
Definitely.
I mean, compliance and all the regulatory requirements are still important in our field when we're conducting clinical trials.
No, that's why, yeah, it will take, the adoption will take some time, but we're in it, like we're in this transition right now. And I think also the FDA is paying more attention now to AI solutions and it does help in decision making. Like they take it into account. We've also adopted modeling and simulations when it comes to like drug absorption, and it took some time for this industry to also to offer products that are parts of the nowadays a standard procedure. And I think now that the more data specific or machine learning tools will become, hopefully will become that part of the standard process, as long as the FDA also looks into these evidence.
So as you guys have already been on the subject, could we touch on some examples of how the AI can speed up or improve the trial efficiency? Guillaume, what would be your take on some examples?
Yeah, sure. So there is already a lot of things that have been developed using AI tools. Of course, I can use the general example of everything that is conversational. So such as the chatbot, it can help a company in general, not specific to clinical trial. It helps a lot of processes to ease the flow, the documentation, generating documents out of the box. You don't need to spend time on your Word document as you used to do before. And more specific to dermatology, because as you know, at Innovaderm, we are specialized in dermatology assessment, the dermatological assessment. So as you can imagine, we need a dermatologist to look at pictures and then assess the efficacy or the state of the disease. By using AI tools, then you're going to ease the process. At the end, it will not change that the dermatologist will take the decision and give the final assessment. But by having an AI machine that is looking at the pictures, who will, for example, reject the back picture, so avoid back and forth with the dermatologist. So we will ensure that we only have just good picture at the end, and also to propose and promote some pictures compared to the others. So this is how we will save time and then money and quality for using the proper person to do the proper job. What do you think, Christian, on your field?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So I've learned about some new ways also to use that, especially at the beginning of that funnel of the clinical trial. So you could also use these chatbots to ask specific questions to the patient, but in different languages. So a bit to your point, like translating these or translating some of the answers and have these better interaction with the patient could also be some improvement in terms of engagement with the patient. Other big bottlenecks are on the screen failure side of things. So having ways where you can be more inclusive by having less coarse inclusion-exclusion criteria that are more like encompassing the full scope or all the information about the patient. So your characterization of the patient is better and you're able to predict essentially if they are good candidates or not for the trial. The other thing that we are facing a lot in neurological trial and especially in Alzheimer's clinical trial is the heterogeneity in disease progression. So how patient progress in time. You have a lot of patients that remain stable and a lot of them that also are declining. In theory, for a trial, you need to have people that are progressing during the duration of the trial to show that the drug is working. And so having ways to predict the natural course of these individuals during the trial allows you to select appropriate individuals for that trial. And to the point of Nardin earlier, that helps you increase the power of the study and therefore your ability to detect effects and small effects of these trials. So that brings a lot of other very interesting benefits, like increasing the power, reducing the sample size, or accelerating the trial because you don't need as many people in your trial.
Yeah, no, I think you, Christian, Guillaume, you covered most of it. The only thing I would add here is it's as simple as just matching, like at least what our team is working on is really being able to match the right. You have the drug, you have the disease, and you have the patients. And in order to make sure this drug is the best for this disease and this drug is the best for this patient population, we need data for that. And I think there's a lot that we can do using machine learning to help have better matches. And again, it's not a magic wand that we're gonna get like 100% success rate from today, but I think we can do much better than where we are right now.
It's an interesting point. I mean, it's always a challenge also to know the interaction of a drug with a particular patient because you don't usually have a lot of information about that interaction, given that's the whole purpose of the clinical trial. So you're always navigating in a context where you have very limited knowledge and information about those two things together. That's also one of the reasons why I was mentioning the natural course of these patients, or like if you understand the natural process of the disease without intervention, that you have a lot more data on, and that may be the first step to start. Like at least you have good characterization of the disease not necessarily with the drug. That's kind of the next step, right? When
Yeah,
you
not
have
necessarily. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I mean, it's unless you actually test it on the patient, you won't know the specifics. Although now, like a lot of the clinical trials, they collect omics data from patients, and that tells you a lot because the drug acts on a molecular level, and if you have the molecular composition of those patients, then you have a much better chance predicting their responsiveness. And we've done studies on that actually, and we were able to predict responders versus non-responders based on the pre-treated samples from the patients.
Okay, so on to our last point for this episode. What would be the next step for AI in clinical trial management? Christian, what would be your take?
Yeah, I think we need to build as much trust as possible with the different actors. Trust in the data that we are manipulating. So that goes from handling the data in a secure and privacy compliant way. There is also some fears related to AI, although it has been in mainstream media for the past year or two, and people are more excited about the adoption of that. There is still also on the other side, like how that data is handled, in which context, and we need to be careful to manage that in the proper way to build that trust and not erode it. So I think that's certainly to put things in place, especially with human data. It's important that we put that in place. And then I think convincing these biotech, large pharma of the perception of risk, essentially, that actually that's kind of circling back to our initial point that there is much more upside than downside of adopting these tools if properly validated. And convincing them and including these AI solution in places where there is maybe less risk or less impact, obviously, but slowly growing into that strategy up to a point where AI will be embedded in different aspects and will have a larger impact.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Christian, when it comes to trust. From what I've seen, like we see two groups: the skepticals and the people that hype it up. And it's neither this or that. It's really like realistic solutions for problems that we have today. We definitely need to establish this more trust. And in my opinion, we need more awareness. And I think what you're doing here in the podcast is great. Like this is one of the things we should be doing, where we have conversations together, like everyone, all the stakeholders, including patients and including hospitals, pharma companies, service providers, or AI companies like us. Like everyone has to be part of that conversation. Everyone has to get some level of awareness to understand the limitations and also the opportunities there. And really, like, if we're all, because it's a big, we're against a huge challenge, and I think it takes all of us to really address it. So yes, trust is really a big one.
Yeah, sure. And it's part of, it's change management, right? This is one of the biggest change. Of course, I'm not going to refer as everybody, we had internet and then now we have AI.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a huge change, maybe not as huge as internet, but it's a change. We have, of course, different generations. People need to be convinced, but it changed already. Now, as a CRO, we receive several requests, of course, and the question is not, do you use? The question switched to, where are you using AI?
Mm-hmm.
So people already have expectations that we already have included AI within our operation. It can be scientific, it can be administrative for efficiency, cost efficiency, etc. But we switched. It's done. So now it's not a question of when. You have to do it, and probably you have started. Now we have, as you said, Nardin and Christian, we have to look at the whole spectrum. So there's a lot of people involved in clinical trial. There is some sections where we will have to wait a little bit, but there is a lot of areas where we can already use AI, and some areas where we need to be more conservative, proof that it's working, and with the time it's gonna it's going to be better and better.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Guillaume. I actually never, I didn't notice it. At least you're coming from a CRO side, like noticing that it becomes the question change from like, are you using AI or not, or now to. So I guess we're already evolving, and already it's accepted, and it's expected to be using those computational tools. And I think we're on our way for it to be really integral part of the whole clinical trial process. In my opinion, honestly, and we kind of put that on our website, but like basically in any other industry, like in aerospace, in manufacturing cars and manufacturing airplanes, you always simulate before you go launch. And I think it's way more important because we're testing on patients to, before we launch a clinical trial, to really simulate on those in silico models and use computational tools.
Yeah, that's why I replied to you, Nardin, that I'm convinced the future of clinical trial will be, I don't know the ratio, if it's going to switch from 40% virtual and 60% on real patients, or maybe at some point it's going to be 100% virtual. I don't know. I don't have the crystal ball, but I'm convinced that more and more simulations going to be run virtually using AI, of course, and we're going to be very close to have like the final, not product, but the final solution before we just have few steps and put it on the market, but not now.
Yeah, it will take time. And I mean, we have to regulatory entities have to really do their due diligence, and it's health that we're talking about, so it's not something we take lightly.
Absolutely. All these rules has been put in place for a good reason, right?
Yeah.
So it's not we're not trying to remove the rules. It's just that we need to ensure that AI will respond accordingly with these rules. And then it takes time, so of course, to ensure that everything is fine, that it's not going in a uncontrolled direction. So by accepting this, I think the industry is going to work together. And as you said, FDA showed already a lot of things where they jump into AI. They learn some procedures to ensure that there is some safeguards, and then but they accept. They didn't say no. They say yes with these constraints.
Yeah.
We are surprisingly ahead of a lot of the pharma, actually, in terms of adopting or at least providing guidelines along those lines. And I think we can do a lot inside the framework of what the regulators have originally put in place. Like I think that it's a sensible way to evaluate patient. Like I don't think we should or we need to change really the framework of evaluating our clinical trial, but there is a lot of optimization and efficiencies that can be brought in and change inside that framework. And I think that's where AI can certainly thrive.
Yeah. I've read this week an article. I don't remember if it was MHRA or another European agency, but they also started to train the clinical trial people to have AI within their operations. So, for example, they gave a guideline about a new job title, which is AI officer. We have already the privacy officer, quality officer, et cetera, et cetera. So they built this frame saying, you see, you should have this, or you should be prepared to have this within your operation. So there are 4, and they help, I think, the people to move toward these new technologies.
So this brings an end to our episode today. Thank you so much to all of you for taking part in this initiative. It was a pleasure having you on the Face Forward podcast.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. It was a true pleasure.
Thank you very much, Nardin and Christian and Valerie. It was very appreciated talking about AI today.
As we conclude another illuminating episode of Face Forward, we find ourselves at the crossroads of science and progress. Remember that behind the jargon and statistics lie stories of unwavering commitment, meticulous observation, and the pursuit of evidence that shapes our understanding of health and disease. Stay at the forefront of knowledge and innovation and follow Face Forward on your preferred platform. My name is Valerie Kovney. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.